Welcome everybody to the LA Blender Users Group. My name is Sterling Goetz. I'm one of several co-leads that helps run this group. David Andrade is on the line. He's another one of those people. Sean Kennedy in the back of the room, the indomitable Sean Kennedy, is also one of those people. And also we've got at least one other guy who's traveling, couldn't make it here today. So we've been around for a number of years. We like to meet about once a quarter. So every 3 months or so, basically when a new version of Blender drops, because then we have enough cool stuff to talk about. Plus, it gives our people long enough time to work on their personal projects and bring them in. That may change in 2024 as after 3.6 gets released in June or July. They're going to move to a 3 release a year schedule. So we may meet a little bit less frequently, but hopefully the meetings will be a little bit more impactful because we'll have enough time to build up good content. Guys, we got a really great agenda for you today. We have, I usually kick these things off with what's new with Blender. I'm already kind of running over time here, but I'll try and keep it short. It's backed by popular demand. I kind of like stopped doing this because there's so many great roundups, but people asked for me to do it again. So we've got David is going to give us a quick Blender 3.5 new features overview. So if you haven't had a chance to download it, it came out this week. Now's your chance. We'll take a quick break and socialize. One of the best parts about this is actually like meeting people in person and finding out what they're working on, what their interests are. So you heard everybody's kind of focus areas. Find the people that are most interested in their area at the breaks and talk to them. We got Sergio doing a presentation on all CG series. He's made mostly with Blender. We've got, fingers crossed, we've got Francesco Siddi.
He's leaving now. He's on his way.
Oh, fantastic. All right, cool. So that should give him enough time to get here, who is basically the number 2 at Blender. So Tom Rosendahl would be the CEO. Francesco would be the COO. Hey, welcome. Come on in, take a seat. So we've got Mike joining. It's on the team in the room. Maybe it's online. He's going to be talking about a project he did for Australian First Nation. And then we've got Wyatt. Wyatt, are you in the room? No. Okay. So maybe it's possible Wyatt may be joining remotely. We'll find out. He's going to be talking about some really cool, he's working on some really cool short film projects using NPR or non-photorealistic rendering techniques. And then we open it up to you. This is my favorite part of these meetings is like where you guys come up. If you have a thumb drive or if you just grab it from online, we'll crack open a web browser tab and you guys show us the Blender centric projects you're working on. And generally speaking, we get some really interesting stuff presented here. Cool. Any questions on that? Nice. Okay. So there's usually in our bigger meetings at least one person that's never seen Blender before. So I throw the slide in for them. It sounds like you're new to Blender, right? So this is what Blender does. It's free software, free for everybody, free to use for whatever you like, for commercial stuff or passion projects. It does all of these different activities that you see on the slide here. And the best part about Blender is not that it's free, it's that the community built around Blender is awesome. Like people are so super supportive, they're very positive. Sean and I were laughing, we're like, I don't think I've ever met like a Blender jerk. You know, like pretty much they're all like really nice people. But it's also backed by some pretty heavyweights, right? So some big game studios, big production houses, a lot of heavy development sponsored by commercial organizations. So that's great. Oh, and usually before we get too far into the meeting, I just like to show it. So this is Blender. This is Blender with the latest splash screen.
We got it.
Oh, whoops. Okay, let me do a Control E and duplicate.
Sure.
There we go. So this is the latest splash screen. It's really kind of adorable. I recommend you check out this girl's stuff on ArtStation. Really very cool. But yeah, this is it. And let's go back to here. So what's new with Blender? So, oh, by the way, this deck is available in the upper left, you'll see an email address for me. Just email me, I'll send you the deck. But Blender 3.5 released, I think sometime around Wednesday or sometime this week. So our timing was impeccable with the meeting. It has just a huge amount of features. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I know Dave's going to go into it. But there's real-time compositing in the viewport. There's vector displacement sculpting, which is super cool. Something that ZBrush has had for a long time, and you can go down. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff with it. There's an essentials asset library built into the product now, and this is the start of Blender shipping with like materials and geometry and like node groups and all sorts of cool stuff. That included a bunch of hair nodes. I'm sure Dave will probably get into. There's been some light improvements. So there's something called light trees, which is also known as many lights sampling, where you can have a scene with like a huge number of lights and it handles it more efficiently. David, I was thinking about you and that thing you did for Barnstorm with that big Nazi stadium when I saw this feature.
Gosh, yeah,
and everything, and boy, that would have helped you. There's been some like general, improvements to like how spot and area lamps work. There's nodes and physics upgrades, like in particular, like cloth simulations are now like 25% faster, which is just a huge jump. But lots of new nodes added. There's USDZ support. There's just better USD support in general because it's really turning out to be this kind of universal format that everybody's using in production. And they've improved support for metal, so things run better on Mac, especially the viewport. At the same time, we shouldn't forget that there's a Blender 3.3.5 long-term support version. So if you're running a big studio and you need stability and multi-year support, that version is LTS. That's probably what you should be running. Blender 3.6 is going to be the next LTS release, which is cool because there's some awesome features going into it. And then if you want to live on the bleeding edge, just download the Blender 3.6 alpha and you can start playing around with things like simulation nodes and all sorts of crazy stuff. So in terms of pet projects, sorry, any questions on any of that? I know we're going to deep dive into new features, so maybe I'll move on. Hold the question. So in terms of projects and films, I will say just before we leave this, if you haven't already, check out the release notes. So again, David's going to take us through this stuff, but the release notes are like super cool. They spent a lot of time putting these together and making them beautiful. So yeah, I highly recommend you check it out. Let's see. Whoops, where are we? Okay, so there's a new open movie project called Pet Projects, which is kind of in production now. So the general gist of it is like, the funny Blender Foundation fact that developers are like cats and artists are like dogs, and the personalities that come with both of those is kind of my gist of where they're going with this. But it looks pretty fun. It's NPR, so when Wyatt gets here, I'm sure he'll be pretty excited about that. There's been some really great short films that have been put out. So this one in particular is from Ian Hubert, who's kind of amazing.
There you go.
All right, so look, I won't play the whole thing, but I will kind of play a faster version of it. So Ian Hubert, who runs a whole bunch of really great tutorials, like lazy tutorials and that kind of thing. He makes like these science fiction movies, and he does it all in Blender. So like everything that's in here is done in Blender, and it's well worth it. He, if you want to join his Patreon, you can actually find out kind of more about like what he's doing, like how he does it, as well as get access to all the demo files and stuff like this. But it's really some pretty cool sci-fi. Recommend you check it out. Anyways, worth watching. Maybe I'll leave that playing during the break. So there is something called a Tiki short film. So Blender Bob, who's kind of one of the tutorial guys that runs a bunch of really great tutorials for Blender, He's doing a short film. The only reason I mention it is because he's asking for people to participate. So if you want to take part in creating assets for a short film, definitely reach out to Blender Bob. I'm sure he's got resources to kind of find out how to do that. Let's close some of these. All right. So, I usually in these meetings like to point out weird uses of Blender, at least one or two. So this is, sometimes they're used to control like drone swarms, and other times they're used to control other stuff. This is an example of using Blender to control robotic arms. So they're literally like using it with Python to like control real life robotic arms. You can see like the actual robot arms start moving down here. So anyways, pretty cool. Also, let's see. Yeah, here's another example of Blender being used to do weird stuff. So down here, you can see people using geometry nodes to create video games within Blender. So they're creating like the Snake game. This is like Tetris. This is Pong. This is like a platformer, which is like remarkable that they're doing this because there's really not a lot of structure in geometry nodes to help do this. You have to like hack to get like loops and things like that. All that's changing in simulation nodes, but yeah, I'm always impressed with what people do with early software. Since our last meeting was canceled, we didn't get a chance to talk about Charge, which is a new open movie by the Blender Foundation.
The driving idea behind the production of Charge was to create a tribute to.
Oh, this is Francesco, who's going to be here later. I'm just going to put this in fast motion here so you guys can see. This is kind of the making of, but they made kind of a, I guess you'd call it, well, they were talking about prior movies, but they made like a photorealistic movie called Charge, and it's pretty impressive. So, and of course, being an open movie, all the assets are available online. So like for that face, they created procedural wrinkle maps for the skin and then like showed people how to do it. It's pretty impressive stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie Charge, definitely recommend you check it out. And then let's see. What else? So, here's the link to the movie itself. So, gosh, in the last 6 months, since our last meeting, AI has exploded. I mean, it was kind of on the boiling back burner for a while, but it's really gone bananas in terms of like use for graphic artists. So there's just a huge amount of AI tools that can be used with Blender to do things like texturing. Like there's a plugin in AI in Blender that allows you to just create any texture on the fly just by typing a description of it. So if you want red chipped bricks, it'll just create a texture called red chipped bricks. And it uses, I think this one uses Midjourney. There's a bunch that you could use, and it's an add-in literally inside Blender. So if you want to do modeling, there's some really excellent advances in creating 3D models from text descriptions. NVIDIA's got some great tools. There's actually some tools that are integrated to Blender where within the viewport, you could literally just say, create me a 5-sided star with a cylinder going up, and it'll just create a 3D model for you. Or something more sophisticated, like create me a Lamborghini, So in addition to that, like if you've always been thinking, gosh, I really need to learn Blender scripting. I need to learn some Python. I need to learn how to make an add-on. Well, good news. If you use something like OpenAI, you can literally just tell it what you want, and it'll write the code for you. And then you just slap that into Blender, and it's amazing. So if you want to create an array of Suzanne monkey heads and, this sort of format, you just do this, slap it into the Python editor, hit go, and it creates it for you. So there's just an amazing amount of stuff. There's more stuff than I could cover here in the short time that I have. I did just want to point out this site, futuretools.io, which allows you to kind of select this guy. His name is Matt Wolf. He does a YouTube channel, and he reviews a lot of these tools, and then he adds them to this catalog. If you go in here, select like generative art, and then type something like Blender, you'll notice there's like thousands. He's got like 17,000 tools. You can actually narrow it down and find tools that plug into Blender or can be used with Blender. So I recommend you check it out. Matt's picks are like his favorites. Let's see. Who's using AI tools to do their CD stuff? Yeah. Which tool is your favorite?
Midjourney.
Yeah, I use Midjourney too. If you're not familiar with Midjourney, you just interface with it through Discord, and you just tell it what you want to create, and then it creates it for you. So I could demo it for you later if you guys want. So anyways, some other stuff that's going on, obviously there's so much stuff that's happened in the last 6 months. I could only show you like a small sample of it just to give you a flavor. So Polyhaven is a place to go get free assets. They had a project called The Shed. It's a community project where basically a bunch of people all collectively developed all the assets to create this little environment, and then they did a short film rolling through it. All the assets are available. I've checked it out. It's pretty cool. There's like over 2 gigs worth of textures that they put in this. So it's freely available to download. Obviously, they used textures that were licensed for that. So check it out. Let's see, what else we got? Armory 3D is an open source game engine. Canoe is another one of those open source game engines. Both have released versions. Armory 3D integrates with Blender, so it's kind of Blender specific. Because I know everybody's going to run out and start playing around vector displacement sculpting, I created a link here that does a search on ArtStation for free VDM brushes. So if you want dragon skin, or you want to do like wood textures or stylized rocks or whatever, these are all like zero cost. So go find your VDMs. I'm sure David's going to demo this for us, but it's just pretty cool stuff. Let's see. Okay, so real quick. So Blender has a conference every year in Amsterdam. David and I are part of a team along with some folks from CG Cookie and the Blender Foundation, who are talking about a North America Blender conference held in Los Angeles. So we're currently doing market research to find out what the appetite is for it. It's come back really positive. So we're thinking about venues. We're thinking sometime next year in April, in like one of the hotel venues of Los Angeles. It'll be like if we do it, it'll be a very small event. It'll be roughly about $250 mark to 10. Hey, come on in.
Thank you.
Hey, Wyatt, I recognize you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Grab a seat. So, so anyways, it'll be small. It'll probably sell out very quick. We want to start small and then grow it, and focus on having extremely high quality sessions. So if you're interested in taking part in any way, definitely have a chat to me at one of the breaks. But again, nothing is confirmed until we decide to go ahead. There's a course called Cinematic Lighting with Blender. This one's one of Gleb Alexandrov's courses. Obviously there's like a million Blender tutorials that's come out in the last 6 months, right? So I'm just going to highlight some of the bigger stuff. So Gleb's usually a fantastic instructor. So if you're into that kind of thing, I recommend you check it out. And then we got, we have a local instructor who has offered, if we have enough people that want a Blender 101 course, he'll do a local course for us, probably here in this very room. So if you're interested in a beginning Blender course, again, come up, talk to me at a break. We'll see if we can make it happen. I was going to mention this endless engines. So if you follow Punisher, he's part of the Corridor Digital crew, or ex-Corridor Digital crew. He runs these 3D contests, and the only reason I bring it up is like there's some really fantastic work on here, and a lot of it's done in Blender. So these guys run that for the winners, they run like a breakdown of how they created it, And it's really insightful to look at the Blender projects and see what tools and aspects and features they use. But there's like, just to give you an idea of what this is. So everybody submits like a certain, it's like a certain format. So it's obviously a card coming in, doing this, and then it exits, and then here's the next artist piece of work. And then every single one of these is unique, and there's like over 100 of them, and it just continuously runs. I like to leave it running on my second monitor and just admire the creativity of people. They're really excellent. Let's see. CG Cookie has a new animation bootcamp. If you want to get into animation, you're new to it. It does cost money. Hey, welcome. Come on in. So there's a Blender 3.6 simulation nodes set of tutorials that are starting to come out. There's a lot of really good ones. This is just one example where this guy creates like this simulation flower kind of thing. But I'm just excited to start seeing simulation nodes. The feature isn't even released yet. You got to go download like pre-release builds to get access to it, but it's pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, NVIDIA has started actually making Blender tutorials, which is pretty awesome, right? Talking about industry support. This is an example of designing and modeling a sci-fi ship that they put up. They have a YouTube channel where you can go check out their stuff. Here's a tutorial on making your own VDM. So obviously, once you played around, downloaded all those ArtStation VDMs, make your own. There's also some pretty good procedural modeling with geometry nodes tutorials. I know geometry nodes is still new for a lot of people. So if you want to get your head around it, CG Cookie is a paid one. The Blender cloud.blender.org, they have like a starting from scratch with geometry nodes course. It's also available. And that's about it. I'm going to stop there and just see, is there anything else that I missed that you guys think is noteworthy we should let the group know about? Yeah.
You mentioned EMs a couple of times. If anybody doesn't know what those are, you may want to explain exactly.
I will. David, are you?
It's coming up.
Yeah, David, are you gonna cover VDMs?
I'm gonna show. I got the demo. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, just it's a good point, Sean. Just as a 10-second overview here, vector displacement maps. So basically what it is it allows you to, when you're sculpting, literally pull out like 3D geometry from a mesh. So it's kind of like displacement maps, but in full 3D with overhangs and everything. So it's not just in a single Z direction. Awesome. Super fun stuff. All right. And it's a good one. Anything else from the group? All right. If you have something to announce, just feel free to give a shout. With that, David. One more thing. If you're new to Blender, these are kind of like some great Blender resources. Obviously, download Blender from the Blender website. Blender Nation's like the LA Times of Blender. Blender.community will take you to a huge number of communities, including Blender Artists, which is where you can go chat to other Blender people and show off your work and ask for feedback and all that good stuff. CG Cookie, probably one of the better Blender courses. They have a free course if you're new to Blender, and the rest is paid. Blender Guru also makes some good stuff, and CG Masters also makes some good stuff. So, all right, buddy, you ready?
Woohoo! All right, yeah, let's take it away. Okay, so Stirling highlighted something that I think we should just briefly talk about. So here, there's an image here that you probably can't read it, but the point is that Stirling is right. Very curiously, this week is the release of Blender 3.5. A lot of major changes were in that one. And then Blender 3.6 comes out right around, gosh, I don't know, somewhere between now and SIGGRAPH time. I'm going to bet you around SIGGRAPH time, so August. Which, by the way, we didn't mention it, but SIGGRAPH is in Los Angeles this year. And there's always a birds of a feather. And there's always a nice get-together. So definitely keep that on your radar. You do not need a SIGGRAPH pass to attend the Blender Birds of a Feather. they might look at you weird, the SIGGRAPH folks, but you don't need a pass to get into it. So just keep that in mind. And it's always a good event. Ton is there and the rest of the team, and it shows off some really great stuff. So we're going to have a 3.6 release, and then we're going to have what's called a breaking release, where the 3 series is self-contained, everything within it can work. But then 4.0 comes out right after that. It looks like sometime in 2024 there. And that 4.0 release will be, actually, it looks like November of this year now that I'm looking at it this way. It looks like November of this year is the goal for 4.0. That is a breaking release. Nothing may work from 3 to 4. Well, things will work from 3 to 4, but you won't be able to go backwards from 4 back to 3. So that's something to kind of think about. But that's super exciting because there's a bunch of new features in this release, and I'm trying to catch up through them because there's just so many. So I'm assuming we're full screen now, right? Or at least close to full screen.
Yep, you're full screen. Yep.
There. So I have a few of these demos, but I'm just going to show off like this really cool video really quick that shows just a little bit about hair. What in Blender, I think it was 3.4 or 3.3, they introduced a new way of creating hair, and it's using a hair curve, right? So as much as I love seeing his face, I'm going to try to just show these. There we go. So that introduces a new thing called hair curves, and this release further refines hair curves really quite significantly. And now there's the ability to just make this almost kind of like in a geometry nodes kind of fashion, which is really, really awesome. And you can just drag and drop. Look at that. You can just literally drag and drop all of this stuff and just start making hair, which is awesome. You know, I can't emphasize that enough. It's a really great tool to use. If you've never used anything hair related, definitely check this out. It lets you really quickly sculpt hair. So naturally I have these demos here. So here is this hair system. We're in Blender 3.5, and we can just drag and drop all of this stuff right on here and just change the hair right away. That's all we're doing, just dragging and dropping it. And probably through Teams, it's a little hard to see, but we are, you know, once you're actually like looking at this, you're able to just very effortlessly manipulate this, save these settings, and then drag and drop them right back into Blender. Now, this is huge because the original version of hair, especially in the 2 dot series, was really quite slow and difficult to manipulate. And on top of that, you couldn't actually really get anything that was really easily visible. It would really do a number on your system. But here, because it's all built through geometry nodes, it is significantly faster. So I've been just dragging and dropping some stuff here and turning it around. So let's do a little like shrink wrap. All right, that one's a bit tough. So it's, again, there's small changes on here, but they're definitely, once you're in here, they're quite awesome. And then this renders so easily. I'm just gonna like leave this right here. So that is a ray trace render using denoise. If you don't know, Blender has an awesome denoiser. In years past, this would take us ages to go ahead and render this as clean as possible. But here in about 10 or so samples, I've got a really nice looking hair. And all I'm doing is just moving my viewport. I've got a 3090 in here, and it just cleans it up really quickly. So hair is awesome. Let's take a look more at this guy. Now, this was a demo from the 3.3 series. I'm going to let this guy load for a hot second. And while he loads, I'm going to pull up this little thing. All right. So this is in Eevee. I'm going to minimize this for a second. So this is in Eevee, and this was the introduction of how hair works. So I know there's a few new people in here, and I just want to kind of go over that. Right now it's building shaders. That's why it's all white, and I do have a lot of different windows running, so I think that's why it's taking its sweet time. But here in a second, we'll have ourselves a really awesome looking hair. By the way, this is real time, which I'm still blown away by. I mean, I know Unreal and all of that can do this too, but it's amazing at how beautiful that you can make this. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull stuff around. I'm just going to comb it. I'm just going to go ahead and just start combing this hair and pulling it around. You can add, of course, more hair to this guy if you really wanted to. Here, let me go ahead and puff it out. So there we go. It's giving itself a hot second to update. But yeah, you're able to just really easily manipulate this hair and add it on top. And as a big fan of Unreal, and you know, Blender and Unreal have a really tight relationship. There was the famous $1 million plus mega grant sent to Blender from the guys at Epic. Well, just recently, there was actually 2 years ago, there was a tool released from Epic called Send to Unreal. I've talked about it a bunch in these meetups, and just recently they released the ability to take this hair straight into Unreal. Now this is part of the demo effect. I wanted to set this up earlier, so there we go. Let me reduce my camera look really quick. So Unreal has an Alembic importer. It also has a new hair system, and it's literally effortlessly. So I'm just gonna like leave this here for a second. You download that add-on. You go to Pipeline, Export. You can go to Settings really quick. There's a whole bunch of settings that are in here, but it's just a one click once you've set that all up. And in the background, this tool will go ahead and export all of it. It's kind of like a custom flavor of FBX and Alembic that they turn your assets into. So just give that a second. We'll let it think. And it's going to update all of my assets. You can tell because they all have little stars next to them. So it's going to go ahead and update it. I didn't really change too much, so nothing is too different. And there you go. You now have your character from Blender inside Unreal, including hair, which I think is the coolest thing. Both Unreal and Blender have new groom tools and new hair tools, and they just went ahead and brought it. So this is what it is. It's called a groom tool, and of course, there's a whole buttload of options in here that you can mess with the hairs to give them a lot more control inside Unreal. But the big thing here is that there is a way to bring all this straight into Unreal, and there are new hair tools inside of Blender that make that really easy. So how cool is that? So that was fur. Let me actually go to hairstyles really quick. So these are hairstyles. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you. I am not a geometry nodes master. So I recommend definitely checking out the blender.org download release-3.5 video. That was the video I was playing here, where he goes through like explaining how some of these geometry nodes work. And you can see as he drags and drops, it changes the hair just a little bit, but it's just enough to give you some nice control, right? So in here, I'm just going to show this off really as a demo. These are all hairs made through geometry nodes and the new hair system. So how cool is that? And then of course I can drag and drop some of this stuff to get some really interesting data and detail into it. So yeah, I love showing this stuff off. Let's go to Preview Geometry Nodes Editor. There we are. This stuff is like voodoo to me, looking at geometry nodes. It changes quite a bit, but those of you who are familiar with node-based, like via Houdini, obviously being I think the biggest example. But if you use Nuke or something like that, or Unreal, you know, it's very similar to Blueprint in that sense. There's just a lot of really great stuff in here. And every one of these is created through a combination of geometry nodes and then, you know, adjusting it by hand. But one of the cool things about geometry nodes, and I'm just going to grab random items here, is that you can go ahead and change any of these values. In this case, it doesn't seem that the artist exposed any of it. But that's just one of the beauties of it, is you can just go ahead and just grab any of this stuff. So I'm just going to just mess around, and there's little changes that are happening here. Actually, that's kind of a fun one. You might be able to see this in Teams. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in here. So here is her hair. It's nice and curly. And we're going to take this curve hair guide and we're going to just drop the factor. And just like that, I'm really quickly manipulating her hair. So the idea is here is that you could take hair curves, sculpt the hair in any way that you want, and then layer geometry nodes on top of that to further modify or even animate the hair in whichever way you want. Super, super cool stuff. So here's braids. And same thing. In this case, they don't have any, it looks like any of the stuff exposed out there, which is okay. But sometimes folks will expose different attributes that you can change, or you can just like dive in there and just start changing them from within the editor itself. So the geometry nodes editor. All right, so that's hairs. And if I come back here to the release notes, there is a lot of stuff that has happened with hair. So definitely a good series to check out how procedural fur and hair works, and then how to modify those hairdos all through geometry nodes. So just love it. I'm going to play this video actually. This is one of my favorite ones. It really kind of shows that they're able to just quickly paint and adjust hair. You can see the curve guides that are there. So if you've never done hair before, they're often driven by a guide. And that is what's helping us here to quickly change that hair. So it looks like they're modifying the radius and shape. I'm kind of curious. Let's see if we can do that ourselves here. Do a live demo if the demo gods allow us. Let's see here. Was it right in here? Oh yeah, take a look at that. That's kind of fun. So we've gone from braids to whatever you want to call this. This is whatever you'd like. So I just love it. If you have a weekend, there's a bunch of great tutorials on geometry nodes, and you can get lost in learning how they work. All right. One thing, by the way, all of these files are available for you. So if you've never, like, where do you start? Where do you download? Blender.org have a demo files menu there, and you can go ahead and just download any of the files that we're talking about. Here's the hair ones. They're right here. You can go ahead and just download these at any point in time. There's tons of examples that you can pick from. All right, let's go ahead and come back down here. So we have hair. We've talked about the hair, the drag and drop of the hair. We showed a little bit of that. Let's see. You drag and drop this, what happens? Oh, look at that. How cool is that? All we did is drag and drop. I love it. This release is so new, so I'm even still exploring and playing with some of the stuff. That definitely did not work.
Oh, there.
Yeah. We'll stay with this one. But again, the point is here is that you can just layer so much stuff with geometry nodes and create some really beautiful and interesting patterns. If you've used 3D Max in the past, you might see the modifier stack. And again, this is if you've never used Blender before, you have a modifier stack over here on the right, and it's, there we go. You can just turn these things off and start to see how they affect if you turn things on or off. And that's effectively what's happening. We're stacking geometry nodes and changing the effect. So it's non-destructive. And that's a workflow that is really awesome in Blender. You can change quite a bit without destroying the underlying basis stuff. Okay, one of my favorite things is animations. So let's take a look at Ellie over here. I'm just going to reload this file really quick. So one of the big changes in animation, there's this guy named Jason Schleifer and a whole bunch of great people who used to work at DreamWorks who now work at Amazon, but they also are part of like the animation working group that go ahead and recommend updates and everything. And I love this stuff. So we have a pose library over here on the right. There is an old one from the old Blender series. If you've used that one is officially gone in 3.5. But the cool thing about this is I can just left click and drag. I can just like drag any one of these shapes and just go ahead and left click and drag. I'm going to zoom in. I can't tell how big the monitor is there, but
it's pretty big.
Okay, good. So you get to see Ellie really up close. So one of the cool things is now you can just literally left click and drag on any one of these poses. I'm going to let go and let, what actually what I am going to do is I'm going to kill Unreal because that likes to be a resource hog. So stand by and get rid of that guy. We love Unreal, but we're going to close it out. Okay, there we go. So let's go take a look at Ellie's face. Let's just make her smile. Oh, it's adorable. I love it. Another thing you can do is you can push your pose beyond just by hitting the E key. So let's see. Let's come back here. Let's try a different pose. It likes it when I switch to a different pose. So now you can push a pose beyond and start to break the rig, which is kind of cool. And a pose doesn't necessarily need to be the entire face. It could be the entire body. So let's do cheerful. It's a cheerful version. And of course, we can push that pose and really break it. Maybe we don't want to break it though. But another thing we can do, and this really makes a little bit more sense once you know what, I'm gonna close that out too, help us a little bit. Another thing you can do is hit Control, and Control will try to reverse it. So it actually works really well with hands. So let's go ahead and come up to her hands. So I can make one hand a fist, or I can hit Control and make the opposite hand a fist. So Blender has always had the ability to pose opposite, it's what it's called, to paste and pose opposite. And now you can do that with your pose tools. So I'm affecting her left hand, and now if I hold down Control, I'm affecting her right hand. Just really awesome little tools to make animators animate and pose out stuff a lot nicer. Yeah, I really like that one. If you come over here to our friends at CG Cookie, who we are coordinating for the BCon USA with, they highlighted a new tool for easing in and easing out in the graph editor. This really shows it just nicely. You literally can just right click and go to the ease operator. You'd have to either do those by hand or delete things or move them around, but no longer. You can now just literally right click in the graph editor and go ahead and ease your keyframes and get a really nice looking shape. So I love that. Super, super cool. Let's come back here to Ellie. Yeah, you could just fall in love with all of this stuff. It's also a free rig. As I mentioned earlier, all of these you can download. Ellie, in fact, is part of the, let me see here, part of demo files. I think she was above. There it is, Ellie Pose Library. You can go ahead and download that. Also, if you've never used Blender before, you even have a lot of free things in addition to these demo files, and one of them is that, here we go. You can download like base meshes of a body, which is really handy if you want to just start practicing on top of that. Or if you want to be an animator, they even have a set of animation rigs, probably a little farther down. But they have, here we go, animation fundamental rigs that you can go ahead and download. These are fully rigged and usable. Here you go, fully rigged and usable, and you can start animating and practicing with them. Hjalti had worked on this. This is a little old now, but it's still, I just like pointing it out because people may not know that this exists. And same with this came out last year. If you want to practice and learn animation, they have a fully featured animation rig that you can go ahead and download. I believe her name is Amy? Rain, it's called Rain. The rig is called Rain. And again, all for free that you can go ahead and grab. And it's pretty awesome, and you can go ahead and practice all your cool Ellie animation. All right, let's close that out.
Any questions for David?
We're going to show off two more things. I got two more, maybe three. We got three. I'm going to come back to bugs. I love bugs, but we're going to come back to them. I do a lot of simulation in Blender for work. So one thing was to speed up in cloth, which is awesome. Now, granted, I baked that a little bit earlier, but I just like cloth sims. This has a ton of vertices. It's just super fast now. So officially 25% faster. So I just like pointing that out. There's still little tricky things that you got to work on, but self-colliding cloth and everything, it's quite nice and quite easy to use inside Blender 3.5. There we go. All right, two more things. It's got a lightning round. This is a show, shameless plug. If you have kids, they might like it. It's called The Bug Buddies. Super shameless plug. You should all go watch it. We animate this show in Blender, and The Bug Buddies. It's on YouTube. It's ridiculous. It's funny. basically it's aimed at everybody who is 6 years old inside. So if you have a snotty kid, or if you are a snotty kid, this is the show for you. It's just a slapstick cartoon that we make inside of Blender. So here you can see a scene that I pulled up. And this is one of the coolest features in 3.5. I got to tell you, really, really excited about this one. It is the ability to do viewport compositing. Even though this is not fully set up, it was working earlier. So here is my compositing node. Super simple. We're not doing anything too crazy here. We're going to come over to this viewport compositor. I added a hue and saturation node, and there we go. And now let's just go to a different frame really quick. Or let's just go ahead and play it. Yeah, wow, this might really tax the system. So there we go. We're rendering, and we're changing the viewport compositing as we're rendering. Granted, we can only ever get like 3 or 4 samples out at a time, but that is just super cool. Not all the nodes are supported in this. You can like really quickly get a feel for what's going on. So yeah, like I said earlier, not all the nodes are supported, but a lot of them are. And as all things in Blender, I'm sure it'll just continue to keep improving. So I just did some basic blur, and I did a hue saturation, and that works out really, really quite well. We have a few layers even. So you can come up here and disable the compositor, and you can see I actually have transparency back there. And I can come back up here and turn on the compositor, and then we composite a nice little blue sky right at the end there. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and delete these really quick. And I'm gonna get my background. And let's go ahead and add a blur. We'll add bokeh blur. Let's do that. And let's go ahead and put it here. And now we're just gonna increase the size. And so we get a little bit of a blur. The grass actually I think is in the foreground in this one, so it doesn't entirely get to where we want, but you can see there's a little bit of blur going on here along the edges and everything. So yeah, viewport compositor, one of my all-time favorite new things inside of Blender 3.5. Highly recommend it. If you're into rendering, there's a little talk about rendering, and there is a new thing called light trees. It's just all about aiming your processing power at the most important things, and it just makes noisier scenes less noisy. You really want to use this. Gosh, I remember just 10 years ago, we were all complaining about fireflies and bright white dots. And now with important sampling and this new light trees, there's another thing that we use quite a bit as well. Obviously, there's denoising that we use scrambling. We use scrambling quite a bit to cull down noise, but it's just awesome that you can like quickly get rid of noise. And this is not a great scene because we're like outside. It's not really that bright. Maybe if yeah, there's a lot of light in the scene because we're lighting it to be outside. So not a really good example, but the idea is here simply, if I come back to this one, really dim and dark scenes, turning on light tree will really help you tremendously to cut down on noise inside your scene. So big fan of that.
Anybody using light trees in earnest? Yeah. Yeah, it's too new. I did a bunch of test renders that actually I can bring up, maybe show later. But yeah, the other cool feature that was introduced in 3.4 was something called path guiding.
Oh yeah, that was the other one I was thinking of. Yeah, path guiding,
which is remarkable, but the problem is it's only CPU only right now. I haven't enabled it for GPU. At least not for NVIDIA and AMD GPUs.
Yep.
So maybe I'm hopeful 3.6 will do some port.
I still think it's so cool how fast things can render in this. Okay, I'll come back over here. There are a lot of updates to Grease Pencil. I am not a Grease Pencil person, so I will encourage people, if you are, to check this out. There's a lot of new tools for drawing, and actually, like, it will recreate your strokes and in like a timely fashion. Like it'll feel as if you're like literally drawing it out. So he drew it, and then you can see that there's like a little animation that replays of basically what you just did. So that is super cool. Light sampling, anisotropic BSDF. I didn't realize that there were updates to this. That's really cool. Anisotropy, think all of your like kitchenware and stuff that like kind of brushed shiny-ish metal. Always tricky to render in Blender, but it looks like they did some really nice updates to really capture a lot better detail and subtlety in it. All right, last thing, which Stirling talked about just a bit, VDM. Actually, let's see if they have like a little thing. I think they did up here. VDM. Here we go. Vector displacement maps. What are vector displacement maps? It is a 32-bit EXR image that is effectively a normal. Oh, there it is. It's effectively a normal. Ooh, there we go. It's effectively a normal. So like a bump is black and white, but this is EXR, so we get depth along with it. Super cool. Let's come over here and click on our tools. And you can just start painting crazy stuff on top of them. Well, obviously we need an ear. This is going to be really frightening, so we'll put the ear in his face. We can put all of this here. So here's the nose. Wow, this is really nightmare fuel right now. So one thing that's happening is when I left click and drag, wherever I left click and drag, it sticks. See that? So. But another thing that you can do is go to stroke and drag and dot. And now you can kind of drag where that guy is going to go. So kind of reposition him. You can hit F on your keyboard to make a bigger brush and thus a bigger nose. And also it merges in really well, which I thought was really surprising. Sometimes in Blender, you can type in a bigger value. So I'm going to type in 1,000. Let's turn off mirroring really quick. And now I might crash it because I did last time, but you can start to see we can get some really wild results. Okay, this nose is clearly too big. All right, so let's come back down to say 100, something a little bit more reasonable. But there you are. This can make some really cool stuff. Come back to stroke, and I'm going to do anchored. And then anchored is cool because then you can just like quickly left click and drag. So it's a little bit like what ZBrush had, right? It's actually exactly what ZBrush had. So you can make these. There's actually a demo file that you can grab. I come over to demo files and sculpting. So if you download the VDM brush demo file, there are 2 that are included. And one of them is the sculpting demo, and the other is the creating brush demo. And there's a whole write-up on how to do it. I have to admit, I did not do this part, so I'm going to recommend if you really want to do it, go ahead and look at it. But effectively, you are baking your sculpture, so you can literally sculpt in here, and then you're baking it to an EXR. And because it's 32-bit float, you can get all of this cool vertice data, and thus you can get some pretty wild. Like that's how you can get the fact that this curves out. Unlike a bump map, which would just be like flat height data, this is literal 3-dimensional data. Yeah, it's total nightmare fuel right now. All right, so with that, those are all the big things in Blender 3.5. But there is the release notes. This is a more detailed version of release notes that you can Google. We'll even take a peek at 3.6. So there's a bunch of stuff that was included in here that you should take a look at. So there's actually a lot of updates to UV maps. I don't UV that much anymore, but you should definitely take a look if you do. There's quite a bit. There's a little bit of work on tessellation, which has been a little bit of an issue. But yeah, lots of really cool stuff in here. And motion tracking, I have used motion tracking in Blender always. I like it even more than After Effects' motion tracking. I've used it even for an Adobe commercial. I use Blender to motion track it. And there's a few updates of optical center, which is always kind of tricky. But the motion tracker in Blender is really awesome. And then there's 3.6, which we will have to get into later because there are a lot of animation updates. I'm an animator by trade, so I kind of lean in really heavily on that. And they're also working quite a bit on sculpting and modeling. So really, really excited to see what's coming. But this is all early. We've got a long way to go. So for now, 3.5, a lot of really great updates. And you should all have really bad nightmares now tonight.
That was awesome. Any questions for David on any of that stuff? Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, anybody can. Online or
Yeah, sorry.
Could you speak about the new benefits of using a Mac M1 or M2 in Blender?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had my Mac outside, and my kid just fell asleep, so I don't want to wake her up. Once a 3-year-old falls asleep, you never want to wake him up. Just let him take a nap for a bit. But anyways, the short answer is there is a big update for Silicon. If you don't know, you can go to Blender release notes really quick again. Blender now supports it natively and can use Metal, which is really awesome. Metal is their version of OpenGL. You know, there's a really cool video. I'd have to hunt for it really again. But there's a nice video that actually showed a comparison of those two. I'll have to dig through it, but it's quite a big speed up actually. I was really quite surprised with it. You're going to get like double to sometimes triple the performance just using Blender 3.5. Actually, here we go. This guy's really awesome. Nate. Let me see. Well, I'll scan for it. I'll scan through the video, but it's basically double to triple the speed in performance. So if I come down to M1, and I have an M1, it's just awesome. So there you go. There you can actually just see here. So Apple had deprecated OpenGL, but Blender can still use it. But now it'll use Metal natively. So that's just really awesome.
So these kinds of speed ups are expected to be experienced on Linux and Windows with something called EV Next, which is like a major revamp to EV. They're going to redevelop it to use Vulkan. So similar to Metal on Mac, Vulkan is kind of allows for software to get closer to the hardware. So there's lots of speed up. EV Next includes a bunch of awesome new features like things like ray tracing, and pretty excited about what's coming that way. But yeah, thanks for the question. We had a question in the back of the room. Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering the new hair systems. How compatible is that with other 3D software, like exporting as like a non-node based or non-particle based asset?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's Alembic. So it's an Alembic groom. I wish I could tell you exactly like what an Alembic groom is and how like Alembic hair. But is a big user of Unreal. It's effectively an Alembic file that you can use, and as long as that other software supports Alembic, and more importantly the groom tools, you should be able to use it. The one thing I will say, though, which brings up something kind of important that both Unreal and Blender don't have, is the ability to have simulation. So I think you can export the simulation out of like Houdini, but Unreal and Blender don't have that. As far as I know, I had to look. It's been a little bit. But effectively, if you can have like hair with Alembic, then yeah, you can just bring this into bring it into Maya or something like that. That is it looks like actually even Unreal recommends using a tool like Shave and Haircut to bring it in. So you might need a tool to bring in Alembic hair, but that's just something to kind of think about.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's also USD. That we didn't talk too much about that. Kind of I'll bring that up really quick. USD, we work a lot with different teams and other software, and USD got a lot of support. It looks tiny, looks like they didn't do too much, but USD is kind of becoming I think it's going to become a new de facto standard in the way we interoperate. So I'm really happy to see that they're still updating that. We do a lot of Omniverse work here, and it's nice to see that USD is getting some love.
Indeed. Any other questions either online or in the room? Who here has played with Blender 3.5 so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, about 5 of us in the room.
Yeah.
That's it.
Nice.
Who's got
There's
the
also-
time?
Yeah, there's also the a reference standard, which basically means what it compiles with and what libraries of Python it uses. So this is nice. It's now OpenColor.io and in Python are like 101. So if you're on ShotGrid or FTrack, we use FTrack. Everybody agrees. We're all on the same reference platform. So for tools and pipeline, which is nice because Blender had its different flavors of Python for a while. Or Nightmare Fuel. That's all I'm going to do. Just more Nightmare Fuel.
Awesome.
All right, I'll stop
All right.
sharing.
All right, Dave. Thanks for that. So just let's see, let me do a desktop share real quick. And so just quick shout out for this tool. Like, you know, if you have trouble keeping up with Blender versions and you find yourself downloading and unzipping and doing that like daily, because there's like literally a daily build if you want to live on the cutting edge. There's a really great tool called Blender Launcher that just reaches out to the Blender build bots and finds like the latest experimental and stable and LTS stuff. You can actually kind of flip through. Here's experimental. So if you want to play around with light linking, this is how you download it. These are your daily builds. Here's your stable builds. So it's just great. It'll just like really lightweight little tool just pops up and says, hey, you want to download this? You go, yep. And it chucks it in a directory and you can launch it straight from there. I use it all the time. It's great tool. All right. So we have been going for about over an hour and 15 minutes. So for those that came in late, this is our agenda for the day. So we are, oh, sorry, I'm not desktop sharing, am I? Am I desktop sharing?
Yeah, you are.
I am, fantastic. Okay. Let me do this. All right. So yeah, this is our agenda. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. So it's about 45 past. So at 12 o'clock, so I recommend you turn your left, turn your right, meet the person you're sitting next to. There's some really interesting people in the room working on some really cool projects. And then we'll reconvene at 12 o'clock noon, local time. All right, so next up is Sergio. He's going to talk about a CG series he made with Blender. And with that, Sergio, take it away. And let me know if you need to get over to, just Alt Tab.
Alt Tab, okay,
Yep.
Sounds good. Well, greetings again, everyone. Some of you may remember me by a couple of presentations I did in 2019. If you don't, that's fine. So basically today, the main course is, and the title is just a little clickbaity, if you will, because it's essentially a proof of concept teaser trailer for an episodic. And before, the appetizer is a commercial I made that led to this project, essentially. So yeah, I'm going to try to make it somewhat condensed, not to take too much time. But so basically in 2020, 2 years ago, I made an all CG commercial for a Twitch streamer. And believe it or not, for those of you, some of you may remember an old IP called Heroes of Might and Magic 3. And people still, play it and stream it on Twitch and all that stuff. So basically I did a commercial for the target audience. So let's just, okay. Screen. Oh, I don't see it. Okay. Full screen. So just really quick, for those of you who are not familiar with the game, basically the entire spot is based off of references to the game because I made it for the target audience. So not to dive too deep into it. So basically this is a tavern where you recruit the heroes, and Eagle Eye is one of the most useless secondary skills in the game. This is one of the most useless heroes in the game, and water magic is the most useless kind of magic in the game. So that's, the gag basically of the commercial. But most importantly, the audience, the live audience of that streamer loved it so much that they started not really bugging me, but they started writing in the chat and writing me DMs saying how awesome it would be to see a longer form project, a feature in a similar style. And I thought, well, why not make an episodic? I started creating the world, characters, storylines, writing the pilot script. And after that, I started doing the trailer, which essentially it's a proof of concept teaser trailer for an episodic. So let me shut up and let's watch it. So I finished it and released it in November of last year. So this is the actual trailer.
Your Grace.
Glad you were able to come. Sit. According to my reports, a certain relic was left in a castle far west. I want you to retrieve it.
Why me?
In return, I can help you with the matter of locating your father.
Run. And don't look back.
Make haste. The ranger is waiting outside.
What wouldn't one do to free a family member from captivity?
Barbarians are roaming our lands and she's sending him.
First impressions can be deceiving.
Have you ever been outside of your kingdom? Can't say I have. It's a dangerous place.
We can't afford to lose a war.
Gather the troops. Any remaining sorcerers must hang.
It is in the darkness that we truly find the light.
What makes you think you are that which dies? Where are you folks traveling to? Obsidian Castle, past the mountain ridge. Many brave warriors went there, and none came back. A creature lurks inside those walls, and if it hears a stranger, it always wakes up.
Do you want to see some magic?
Something like that. Well, of course, you have to be out of your mind to do this on your own, which, what are you going to do? So if you think that it was difficult to put it together, well, that was nothing compared to now, where I thought it would be easier to find a relevant agent or producer or what have you. But, the nature of the industry is a little bit different. And so now I'm kind of in the process because, this thing, and I intend to make at least the first season of it, it could be done the traditional industry route, or it could be done independent route. So if you happen to know someone, or if you would like to join, if you're interested, please let me know. I would be interested to talk about it. Now, in terms of the overall pipeline, where's it good? In terms of the overall pipeline, most of it was done in Blender, pretty much, and then with some auxiliary programs. Most of it was still Blender, and then compositing I did in Nuke. But then off the top of my head, about half the shots didn't have any compositing at all. It was just straight EXRs out of Blender into Resolve, where I did the cut and color correction. So if we were to, overall, so in terms of the cinematography, like I mentioned, well, I've been doing cinematography for a little bit longer than I've been doing 3D and visual effects. And so it's important to have a specific camera sensor, specific set of lenses, and specific camera moves, because for some projects, it doesn't matter, camera moves and all that stuff can be whatever you want them to be. To me, it was important, we have sticks, we have dolly, we have a crane, we have drones or handheld. All that is kind of grounded in reality. And in terms of the grade, I don't know if it does, but I mean, in the grade, because I'm an Alexa guy, and I had in Resolve, I had custom curves and for highlight roll-offs, for tints and all that stuff, because to me, that was the biggest reason to use ACES, because I heard reasons for using, if you're familiar with the ACES workflow, because when I heard about it, I thought, oh, that means that I can make my renders look like footage from an Alexa camera. So in terms of, let's talk about the landscapes. So most of let's find a decent landscape. There we go. Most of the terrain displacement maps, I used World Creator for that because it's just very efficient and easy to use. However, World Creator, well, I mean, I'm not a fan of the texturing when you export the textures, and they don't look that great in Blender. And here's a good example of that. Like I ended up, oh, come on. So I ended up basically mixing a few different material. Well, I mean, principal BSDFs with texture sets. If I can find the folder. Yeah. Oh, come on. So essentially, I brought in the texture sets from World Creator, was disappointed. And then the cool thing about World Creator is that depending on the materials you make in World Creator, it creates masks for these materials, and it exports the so-called splat maps, which I was able to use. So you split a channel and use a mask to then mix your own photo textures, essentially. So most of the terrains, i.e. mountains and so on and so forth, it was, for the most part, 3 different materials mixed together. So mostly by masks or sometimes vertex colors, like go back here. So the rocks are one shade, one set of textures, then the grass is another one, and then you have residual pieces from World Creator, basically. Sometimes, like in the case of this thing, like the road was vertex painted. The rest, again, combination of all these things. In terms of the vegetation, I bought a long time ago, I bought a Botanique, I think they're French, add-on off of Blender Market. And I think I have the light version, which was more than enough. Let me take a sip of water. More than enough for it. And some people have complimented the shot, specifically the water. And some people were wondering, oh, did you use Houdini for a water sim? Well, actually, it was just a simple plane with a couple of noise textures. And the trick is to have a driver and use, as you can you see it? Or should I zoom in a little bit? So basically on the left, so you create the location dependency of a value, and you add a driver, and you use like an empty object to drive these procedural textures to create that flow. So, and the rest is just, tuning the Fresnel and all that stuff. Yeah, so that's the gist when it comes to the landscapes. When it comes to, oh, and by the way, this is these 2 shots have geometry nodes, which I think these cottages are from Blenderessa, I think, which came in handy because, with the amount of work, I mean, whenever you can cut corners and, find and buy some stuff, it always helps. And these pine trees are from Mantissa, what's his name? Mitch Sinavi, I think. And yeah, so this is that when it comes to the landscapes, and sometimes there's a lot of mixing materials and all that stuff. When it came to the characters, this mountain, by the way, I found it's a CC0 mountain. May as well use it. It looks cool. Just change it, textures or shader parameters, and off you go. Now, when it came to texture, and the biggest thing is that since this is like an ensemble cast, the biggest thing for me, because the most important thing is for you to convince yourself that's a good idea. And so the biggest thing was, okay, can I make characters that don't look like dog poop, if you will? And a big shout out to, there was a course, I think it was from Blender Cooking, the sponsors, or called Human. Yeah. And I endorsed that course because I was able to see, and I was able to have confidence in that I can make all these human faces essentially. And when it came to animation, before we jump into faces, in regards to the costumes, so the costumes for that, in order to make them and do the simulations, I used Marvelous Designer because that's the right software for it. And there's a workflow for importing Limbic and exporting PC 2.0 cache out of Marvelous Designer, but it's extremely convenient for that reason. A couple of costumes I found on ArtStation, and I just bought them and simulated them just to save time. For others, you got to make them from scratch. So yeah, there's that. And when it came to facial animations, at first I wanted to use the software they used on Love, Death, and Robots, a French company, but then they got acquired by somebody else and you no longer were able to buy the licenses. I thought, okay. I found basically a carbon copy that was cheaper. It's still around. However, I wasn't able to see high fidelity results. I was thinking, okay, I might have to do it by hand, which is what I ended up doing. So in terms of facial rigs, there's a couple of different, they're both ARKit compatible rigs, and both of them have their pros and cons. But I found towards the end, it's better to start off with a mesh, with a base mesh, with photoscanned facial shapes, and not to overuse them, but to augment them into the ARKit for, I guess, lack of a more efficient solution. So that's what I used. What else? Oh yeah, and so in terms of the overall workflow, as opposed to the traditional pipeline, where let's do all the designs and all the pre-production, then let's do all the 3D stuff, then we're going to go into copying, and then we're going to do the grade and the cut. This process was just one whole thing. So it was a continuous back and forth of when I was rendering images, and then I would just render like a still and bring it into Resolve, start doing the grade so I understand what needs to be like a stop down, what needs to be changed, and so on and so forth. And it was a continuous, two-way sort of process. In terms of the actors, I had a blast working with them. Most of them were in the UK, so I wasn't able to, meet them in person and do whatever, mocap or facial tracking or whatever. So I directed them during the recording, and then they also were using their phones that I later brought into Blender and basically did it the traditional way, if you will. And one notable thing, that one of the actors who's not from the UK is also the voice of the leading character of the Broken Sword series, if anybody's familiar with those. Because those were my favorite adventure games from the late 90s when I played games. So that's an honor for me. What else? Yeah, and so in regards to, skin shading and all that stuff, it's basically, again, similar to what the CG Cookie course is, with some like minor adjustments and tweaks, because you got to see it and test for yourself. Also, an interesting a tip, if you will, that I got from a guy who works at Pixar and DreamWorks, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, who's a Maya person. But if you guys render EXR sequences, a good way to save on time and all that stuff is to use DWAP compression, because the difference in quality is almost imperceivable, but you save a whole lot on storage space, because all these frames were rendered as at 4K resolution. Like this master file is 2K, but there's a difference in terms of capturing details on faces and all that stuff. And with DWAP compression, you save a whole lot of on storage space, regardless whether it's just regular EXR or multi-layer. That's about it, I think. Maybe it was a little bit too condensed, but that's it.
Any questions? Yeah. What was that compression format again?
DWAB, DWAB. So, but also I encourage everyone to do your own research, because on all the tests, because I did, a ton of tests, obviously, and compared the results. In most cases, you are not able to see any difference. There was one instance, but I think it was Nuke, because, regardless, Blender renders were DWAB EXRs, renders out of Nuke were also DWAB EXRs. So probably Nuke kind of shot the bed on that. But so do your own test, but it saved a whole lot on storage space, yeah.
Did you do storyboards and edit boards or scratch dialogue?
Well, so yes, so the generally I would, if there was like a budget and a team of people, I just kept everything in my head. Since I was doing, like, at some point I thought, oh my God, I gotta, add like a shot here. And so for some shots, I did some thumbnails for myself in order to figure out, okay, yeah, I get this option, that option, and so on. If I had to like plug a hole in the cut, because everything was continuously being assembled and all that stuff. So in terms of scratch, well, I mean, I had the script for the trailer, and of course, in case I asked the actors to record extra lines that I knew most likely I wasn't going to use, but still I had them. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Environmental or like?
Good question. So, well, since I think as a DP, like I imagine, like to me, yeah, the specific, like the numbers or T-stops, they don't match. But my thinking methodology is the same as if it was a live action set, for instance. So in terms of the lighting here, yeah, there are HDRIs, and then last year I found like 25 free sky images. So because, HDRIs, you can, blow the highlights and all that stuff. So in the background on most of them, not all of them, on most of them, HDRIs from HDRI Haven, and then these free sky texture maps. And then obviously, every, talent and scene is lit in a certain way to get certain values in Resolve. So if, because Resolve is the final step, and so okay, well, these values, I need to bring this up a step, I need to bring this down a step, and so there's a lot of moving elements. But so yeah, it's a combination of HDRIs for the overall environment and then additional lamps for the scene and all that stuff. For the skies, one note on HDRI images, HDRI Haven is awesome. However, there's a thing with, let me find that shot, with their sunset and sunrise images, it seems that they weren't correctly transcoded, because like the saturation, it's not exactly how it's supposed to be. So this one HDRI, I found a cool website called locationtextures.com, and it's not free, but they have a lot of them, and they're correctly transcoded to ACES format, and they read correctly. And also for the night skies, if I can find these, yeah, I basically ended up just adding the sky texture in Blender with some like noise. That's because for night images, it's very difficult to find noise-free photographs. So, but I think it works. Yeah. There was another question, I think. No? Oh, okay.
Complexity and like heaviness of your scenes, like count.
In that sense, I thought you were talking. So okay, so in terms of the complexities of everything, because it's a lot of work. But my recommendation is for everyone just to go gradually and to slowly increase the complexity of your projects, because lower steps give you confidence to keep going. In terms of the complexity, like I wouldn't say, well, the only thing that took a while, well, like this shot took a while because there's a ton of these knights, horses, animations, and there's a ton of stuff. So some things, I would render stuff separately, comp these in. But aside from the faces, they took a long time to do. And if for those of you who are maybe new to Blender or whatever, it's common practice in the industry to render things separately, i.e. the background separately, the body or the outfit, the costume separately, and then the facial animation. Well, it depends on the specifics, of course. So that if you need to redo facial animations, you can just render the face and not render everything else. And you just comp everything in and saves you time. So yeah, aside from the faces, everything else. And I mean, I bought my PC 2.5 years ago, and it was quite beefy. It still, works well. So the shots, they didn't take that long to render.
What's your average frame render time?
So for faces, it was between 15 and some of them took 30 minutes per frame, just the face. Everything else, I don't know, like 5 to 10 per frame, which is pretty good. Yeah. I mean, except for some cases like where there's a lot of, like knights or whatever. The rest, no, they didn't take that long. Yeah. So when it comes to complexity, I didn't really face any issues. The only thing is that there were some quirks with the renders out of Blender a couple of times, like minor ones. Like on this shot, for instance, there was a weird edge on the hair that kept we're talking like 0.1 on the gamma. It's not really visible, but it was, well, quite unsettling for me. Other than that, I would say, well, not my first time using Blender, so everything was, as usual, very smooth. So, minus some like minor things, but yeah.
Something I noticed. Wire line on the eyes. How'd you do that?
The wire line?
The water line. It's like the
lower
eyelid meets the eyeball.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't take somebody else, credit for somebody else's work. So once again, that CG Cookie course goes over it. But then it depends, because some of the characters I started with a slightly different topology. So yeah, you have to still put a lot of work on all that stuff. But basically, it's a separate object that is parented to the armature between the eye and the rest of the head, and then you create a shader for it and adjust the parameters depending on your needs. But yeah, well, thank you. And again, Blender, was it called Human Course? Or I don't remember.
It's called Human.
Yeah.
So they're 5 instrumental.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's that.
Thanks for good. So
Yeah. I brought a couple of YouTube Shorts breakdowns, but I don't think there's time for them anyways. And they're not that helpful.
Yeah, throw them in our Discord actually
Okay.
later, and
right.
throw links to them in the Discord chat,
Will
and
do.
people can kind of watch them.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it.
Well,
Yeah, appreciate you.
Grammar
Stay
bottle,
on
yeah.
course. All right. So next we have Francesco Siddi from. Do I refer to you as being from the Blender Studio or the Blender Foundation or the Blender Institute?
You can just say Blender.
The Blender organization. All right, fantastic. Why don't you introduce yourself and then just take it away?
Can I have like a web browser maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's grab you a web browser.
Thank you.
All right. All yours.
All right. So, okay. most of this is going to be me trying to type. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for, I guess it's amazing to even be here. Like I came here 2 weeks ago for GDC. And then last week, at the beginning of this week, I was here in LA to visit friends. And then I met with Sean. And then I realized that there was going to be a meetup. So, of course, I have to be here. I am Francesco. I work at Blender. I have a couple of roles there. The main one, like on the overall project level, is COO. It means I do operations. I work together with Ton to make sure that the vision for the project, the projects that we establish as an organization, they get carried out and get executed, and they happen as good as we can, make them happen. And one of the other main activities that I do there is to manage the Blender Studio. You guys might have seen some of the short films that Blender Studio does. So the main goal of the studio is, of course, to push the Blender development by creating creative challenges that then have to be solved with the technology, new technology, existing technology. But then another thing that we are trying to communicate more about the activities of the studio is that we share production assets, production files, and these guys know since the very beginning, but it's especially the production knowledge. So how do you do stuff? And the production pipeline even more in particular, because that is the question that everybody has as Blender adoption grows beyond individuals and small teams, is like, how do you effectively collaborate using Blender? How do you set up a pipeline from scratch, from nothing, doing all the different things that you need to do, for example, when doing filmmaking? And we do a lot of that. And that's like a big target for this year for the studio, to really work hard on making sure that that value is communicated on the studio website and on the platforms that we have. And the idea is to have all that knowledge available, just like Blender itself. So it should all be free, it should all be super accessible, it should be well documented. And that's like a big thing that we are really trying to steer our efforts towards. And of course, continue making shorts. And I love all this. So I work at the studio facilitating the process of the artists and the developers to make sure that we can do as much of this as possible. So basically today, I mean, it's a little bit impromptu. So I just want to share some things, and then I think as much time as possible to answer questions if anyone has, or talk about stuff. Then we have the break. We can also talk more informally, however you like it. So as I mentioned, I was here for GDC. I will write the GDC report when I go back. But to give you the preview, the idea was to go. It was me and Dalai Felinto. He's a product manager and a developer coordinator at Blender, and we were there to kind of connect with a lot of people from the industry, from partners, the fund members, and also try to attend a gaming-centric event for the first time. So it was the first time that Blender was at GDC officially, and it was so interesting. Like, we've been at SIGGRAPH for like 20 years or so, and more. My first SIGGRAPH, my first time in the US was in 2012, and it was an amazing experience. It was here in LA, and also just seeing this kind of event, the size, the venue, it was really cool. But GDC is like 3-4 times bigger. It's like a whole other world, like world of gaming. Of course, it's much bigger than filmmaking and just computer graphics technology, and it was really, really good to see like the presence of the different industry players, learn new things, discover new projects that are huge and you never heard about, and a lot of people using Blender. So in a sense, like the past couple of years with Blender have been very nice, because there's been a lot of positive recognition for the project, and people come forward saying, yeah, we use Blender and we are very happy with it, instead of, Blender sucks a little bit. And that you always get, but like actually people actively, reaching out and sharing how Blender helps them to do things. It's been extremely rewarding. And this is, of course, the success of the Blender community, because that's what everybody praises, right? It's like the work that everybody here in the room does. It's the work that, of being available, sharing the knowledge, like that kind of stuff. That's what still makes Blender stand out. And that's what everybody sees, or at least feels. And so I met with outsourcing studios. They're like, yeah, we use Blender for making all the assets for these AAA games and big organizations, and without Blender we wouldn't even exist. We are 100% Blender. Like, oh, cool. So that was a little bit like the GDC experience. A quick summary of things that happened last year, because you guys might have talked about it already, but last year we did the Charge open movie, which maybe you've seen the making of, so very exciting, very challenging to do that. But all the files are now published. A lot of things are out there for everyone to play with and enjoy. It was the year where we could start doing more workshops as well. In particular, the animation project is moving forward, and for that we got a lot of people over at the studio. The hair system development started, and you've seen in 3.5 in the new release that it took a step further with this kind of presets and this bundle of nodes that help you to actually achieve grooming without being Einstein and knowing vector math and spatial transforms, so make all that kind of knowledge more accessible and easy. And that was a project that started already last year. So these things take a while, and it was really instrumental also for the execution of Charge. We went to events for the first time since the pandemic. So there was SIGGRAPH Vancouver, there was NSC, and these events are super important to connect and be visible, and otherwise we don't really get out there much. It's mostly everything online, right? So these events are super important, and this year we are coming to SIGGRAPH, of course. So I think it would be awesome to try and make something happen around that time, or at least we will be definitely in the area with lots of people from the team. Last year was like 10, 15 people or so. I don't know have you guys seen like the video that we made for SIGGRAPH? I don't know if people have seen it. I can just show you real quick because it's fun. Like, so it's a video that Pablo made. It's like, I'm showing you the holiday vacation slides, but it's really short. So Blender, SIGGRAPH. 2022. Like if I type 2, why does it say 18? Like I am literally pressing 2 on the keyboard, but yeah, it's fine. Yeah. All right. So here. So in Canada, you have to wear safety vests when you're building the trade show. That's why everybody's wearing a safety vest. That was like a fun, this was like super cool because, of course, you guys maybe know this guy. He's at Catmull. So the founder of Pixar. I dropped by the booth to check out if Blender is doing well or not and give his compliments to the project. And they had a chat with Don. It was really cool. So of course, the interesting part is not like our my face being there all the time, but it's more like seeing how, in events like this, Blender is usually visible everywhere in the different stands, and people are using it for doing all sorts of different things. And there is this guy and this guy. Like, it was so amazing to see people walking around with Blender on their skin. It was really, really, it was really something. And so we come back here next year and we make another fun video. So yeah, and Annecy is essentially the same, but more focused on animation. It's an event that happens in France, much more focused on the animation industry. We are working on a end of year report for 2021 from the foundation, which is basically a breakdown of all these activities, a reiteration of the mission, the people that are working on the project, and what we are doing, and like a financial breakdown of the expenses, what the donations do, where the money goes. And we've been doing this for like the past 3 years. Last year we were really late. This year we're going to be on time, which means very soon. Just want to take like 5 more minutes, not even, like really quick, to tell you, for me, personal highlights of things that have happened this year, and then like maybe there are questions or like other things we want to talk about. But the big thing was, of course, the move to Gitia, right? The project.blender.org website. Let's see if this keyboard works better. For over a decade, Blender Blender development was self-hosted on a platform called Fabricator, which is essentially our own self-hosted development, triaging, and code review infrastructure. And since during last year, we started moving over, which is a massive project. It took many people, like 4 or 5 people, several weeks of work. So it was like quite an investment to do. And we moved on to Gitia, which is essentially a free and open source self-hostable version of GitHub. Very similar user experience, very similar design. So for people that are familiar with that kind of pattern, the pattern of pull requests, tickets, issues, I think it helps to make the project much more accessible and easy to read and understand, because the previous portal, I think, was a little bit opaque. It was very powerful and, designed around very interesting user interaction paradigms. But I think that for most people, also casual contributors, this is very useful. And we have a little bit more control over how things look like and how the project can be customized. There's very lively community around it. This was really, really a big deal. And it's kind of the beginning of how we hope this evolves in the future. Lots of improvements are coming to the platform itself. The Gitia community is very alive and very interested in helping to make sure the Blender is successful being hosted on this kind of platform. So I'm very hopeful that this helps Blender to grow further. And in general, the strategy for this, you see like that we made this developer like navbar, and the idea is to basically have more and more useful things up here so that it feels very consistent. So if you want to develop stuff, then you can find good resources for development, documentation, API documentation, issue reporting, forums, and so on. So that's a little bit like the strategy to kind of make the developer experience more cohesive and more discoverable. We have a new production producer at the studio that is called Fiona, and she joined from a French animation studio, the studio that did the Unicorn Wars. Probably here it didn't really come out, but it's like a full feature film made with Blender. It's out there if you guys have the chance to check it out. It's something mind-blowing. And she came over to the studio. She's gonna help these activities that we are doing and taking a little bit of the work that me and Ton are doing so that we can be more efficient. We're working on the pet projects at the studio, which I would love to studio.blender.org. You guys probably heard about the Blender Studio website. So we are, one of the amazing things that she's doing is to share on a regular basis on the blog every week, like the production recap, so you can actually see what we are doing, what the team is doing, and see some demos already, demo files, examples of work that has been going on. And it's free and it's public, so I think it's cool. And we are developing larger projects, but that is unannounced. But you might know that light linking started to be developed at the studio by Sergey Brecht and Wyatt, along with another set of improvements to the Cycles engine, and that's related to that project as well. So that's going to be an exciting announcement coming up in a few weeks, hopefully. And the final thing is we are working on the extensions platform. So a way for Blender to be extended through online connections, but also in general as a tool. So to basically create bundles of assets and themes and key maps and add-ons and to distribute these different things and make them available into Blender in a more accessible and powerful way. That's something we started last year, developing a website, extensions of Blender.org, but now we are focusing on making sure that this can happen very well within Blender itself. so that then the online connection also can be more powerful. And basically the strategy is that this way Blender becomes more extensible and usable thanks to the efforts of the community. So that's like a very exciting development for Blender, I think, that we're going to see this year. So, thank you for listening to this mini update. I don't know if there are any question, like very quick, and then I guess we want to have our break. But if people want to have,
Yeah, I had a question. When you see stuff like Mixamo and Casador doing AI animation, and you do stuff that Real Illusion is doing with character animation, what do you think the future of, I know you have Rigify, but what do you think the future of creating characters with automatic rigs will be for Blender going on in the future, say like in 4.0 and onto that with the new techniques with AI and auto rigging and things like that? Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, thanks for the question. There is this Blender Animation 25 project, which is essentially really focusing on this, like how do you make Blender ready for the next 10 years of character animation, taking inspiration from the best currently existing animation tools that are known, including high-end proprietary tools such as Primo or Presto from DreamWorks and Pixar, and also looking at what are the trends. For example, indeed, like a tool like Cascador that has augmented kind of rigging, or making like rigging more intuitive, ephemeral rigging. There is a lot of people with a lot of good ideas and opinions that are involved in the project currently. So there is like the Blender animation rigging module in the Blender chat where people are there having more ideas than time to develop them. And Nathan Bagdal, he's joining the Blender Studio team like next month. Well, actually this month, because it's April already, to help out and expand that team. And I hope that, maybe in a month or two, there will be a clearer plan, because the past few months have been a lot of exploration. So these things are all very much on the radar, what, other tools are doing. And in the next weeks or months, there will be a clearer plan with a clearer roadmap of targets to achieve. But this is meant to be a project that takes a couple of years, because if you want to do something so fundamental, it takes a little bit of time. So it's something that is definitely being looked at. Yes. So there was a question in the room.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You just get tattoos on people's skin.
Yeah, it's very real. They used ink. It was quite cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So, like in terms of the product and AI, are there any initiatives to think through all the various feature areas of the product and how AI impacts that, and what platforms or public AI technology the product can use?
Yeah, I think that even if Blender developers don't think of AI, everyone else is thinking of AI. So for kind of keeping the entropy, we should probably not think about it at all. But I'm kidding. Like, of course, half of the conversation at GDC, they were about AI, right? Especially because last week everybody announced an AI, and then next week the AIs will announce their own AIs, and then at some point we will maybe even find out what to do with these AIs. It's of course there is big interest already for years, right, in Blender to see what AI workflows can add to Blender. And in the past, we even supported some developer that was working on integrating AI rigging, for example. So based on a character mesh, there was a paper that would be able to build a rig for a character, entirely AI driven. Nowadays, you see stability providing integration. People using Blender as a playground for AI, which is very interesting. I think for the Blender project, one of the points of view, there is not really a formal stance, and this is something that is definitely going to be studied further, and that is a very interesting topic, and Blender is there for everyone that is interested in this topic. Like, the focus of Blender is to enable individual small teams to make content and to be in control of the content. And a lot of the AI that is in the market right now, it's a service. So it's something that is very difficult to control and to own. And it's incredibly powerful. It's incredible power, but it's not something that the user can have for themselves on a device. And that is something to be aware of. And also, this is leaving aside where those models and where the data to train those models come from. So I think that for Blender, the main focus is how to make sure that AI workflows are, first of all, assistive. So they are things that can very well understand from the context of the work that a person is doing how to add something to it and allow the users to be in control, and especially that the user themselves can manage. And that is something that if you talk to Stability or OpenAI or NVIDIA or anyone that is building these things, that's not really the top priority. The priority when you listen to people talking about AI is speed, efficiency, creativity, like all these things that the artists, they don't necessarily need that way. And so obviously it's a super hot topic right now, and I'm curious if in a few weeks it keeps on this trajectory of things chill out a little bit, and then can actually think about what to do with this. So yeah, I hope that this answers the question. Okay, this is our sign. Anything else? Thank you for your attention.
Good. All right, good timing. So we've been going for a couple of hours now, so we're gonna stop and take a 15-minute break. So everybody try to be back in the room and ready for the next presentation. Let's call it 12:10. Sorry, 1:10. So 10 past 1. All right. So thanks everybody for folks that are online. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Feel free to come back to us at 15 past. All right, over to you. So why don't you introduce yourself first, and then
yeah, of course. Hello everyone. I'm Wyatt Hall. Hi Ryan. Nice to see you again. I'm a director, animator, VFX artist. I do wear a lot of hats. I started Winterstellar Studios. It was just a way for me to continue freelancing, have like a little freelancing company. It's since then ballooned into a small little animation studio that I run with some friends, artists, 3D people, and 2D people also too. We really, really like to work on stylized projects. And so last year, I had a client come to me with a script he wanted to turn into an animated short. He said 8 to 10 minutes. We did storyboards. It ended up being 16 minutes, and we still made it, which was very, very fun. But here we go. So on that project, the thing I really want to talk about today is LineArt, and specifically the grease pencil modifier, because it's a very touchy thing to work with in Blender. And a lot of you Blender veterans may remember Freestyle, which is how you used to be able to render LineArt in Blender back in the day. And that was more of a post process. LineArt is basically the same technology, but it functions differently, and it's a lot more user friendly. And so I really like to use it. This is the project that we did last year. You can see we have these very stylized character models. We're drawing the lines all over them, basically just contour shapes. And we're also, especially, this is the real power of having essentially freestyle in grease pencil, is it allows you access to all the other fun modifiers and everything that grease pencil has. So we can boil the lines a little bit with noise, adjust the thickness and everything along the curve, which you could also do in freestyle, but it's just easier, trust me. I'm not sure if maybe I can play the trailer real quick. I know we're a little short on time, but just so you can get a sense for how it looks in motion. So the project's not released yet, but this is just kind of a taste of sort of the visuals that we ended up with. So we were going for a very painterly style. All the backgrounds we actually painted in Tilt Brush, the VR program, and then applied a little bit of extra post-processing onto it. So that was kind of my first big foray into line art rendering with grease pencil. Before that, I was anticipating to use freestyle just because that's what I knew, but line art really gives you some extra things to work with. And I'm looking for my blend file here real quick. But yes, here we go.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just running the build, so you'll have to.
Oh, I got you.
Drag
I'll
and
just
drop
open it from there. That's fine. Yeah.
Or drag and drop it or open it. Yep.
Here it is.
Guide you there.
Would you be so kind?
Yeah, good. Documents. PGA. Presentations.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, sweet. Great. So last night I made a quick little demo scene here. And this is going to use line art. Right now I have it off. It's always good to leave your line art off until you are ready to start playing with it, because as soon as it turns on, it starts calculating. And the heavier your scene is, the more it's going to slow your system down, because it takes a lot of system resources to essentially ray trace everything from the camera and find all the contour angles. That's how it's working under the hood. I am going to turn it on so we can start seeing some lines here. And also maybe switch into rendered view. This is a pretty lightweight scene, so it's going to go pretty quick. Just to show you how it works when you're in a scene, it's quote unquote real time. If I leave the camera view, you can see that it is drawing the lines. It's superimposing the lines on top of the 3D objects in 3D space. So it kind of has this like, this little jump off effect where it kind of cages everything. And it's only drawing things that are visible to the camera. So you can see from the camera, we're not seeing the back faces of the objects. Those don't get lines. Only things that are facing the camera get lines. The nicest thing about line art, really, is the ability to bake everything down. So here's my line art modifier, and I'll show you real quick how to make that. But first, you can bake it. If you had animation in the scene, it would trace all of that. You can see it just made a bunch of keyframes at the bottom. What those become is the same thing as if you were going to go in and grease pencil and draw shapes and draw frames and everything. They become shape keyframes essentially. So if I switch over to the dope sheet and bring up our grease pencil sheet, you can see that we have on our grease pencil layer a bunch of lines. Every frame it bakes it. So every frame is a baked line. And the nice thing is that you can tab into, well, you don't have pie menus. You can tab into draw mode. And if you ended up during your bake with a line that you didn't like, but you can't just disable the line entirely, you can come in and you just erase the line that you want. And then that gets saved in your bake automatically. So whenever you're tabbing along in your frames, it vanishes for that part. So that's super handy to have. But how do we get there? So I'm going to really quick give you like a short tutorial on how to do grease pencil with line art, the easiest way, and also some things to watch out for. Easiest way to get a line art into your scene is with a grease pencil blank object. You can just throw it in anywhere. Obviously, it'll appear at the cursor. That's where it is. Right now, there's nothing on it. It's blank. It's literally just an origin, tiny little origin point there. You're going to want to go over to your modifiers. And in the modifiers, you just select LineArt. Now, there's no LineArt yet. You're going to have to do a couple things. You need to define which collection it's going to draw the objects. This is really where LineArt gets meticulous, because you can choose between a collection, a single object that you want to draw, or you could draw your whole scene. The easiest way to get straight into it is just to go draw the entire scene. However, if you have like characters and a background in your scene, that's going to be a lot for it to calculate. That's going to slow your system down pretty quick. It's easiest to use collection. It's most likely that you're going to use the collection mode because you're probably going to have a character with a couple objects on them all rigged to something that you need line art on, or like a prop or something. So for this example, we're going to draw everything in the normal collection. The next thing you have to select is what grease pencil layer do you want this to draw on? Remember that was down here, whichever grease pencil layer. You can have multiple layers, just as you can have multiple line art modifiers. If you want one layer to be drawing just like the eyes and another layer to draw the rest of the body, you can do that, so you can control each of them. But for now, we're just going to keep it to one layer, and then you select whatever grease pencil material you want to use. We're going to use the black line. You can choose edge types. This is relatively self-explanatory. Contour is going to be your go-to. Most likely you can choose just to do only the silhouette if you wanted, which would look something a little bit more like this. But we're going to keep it to contour. The rest of it, once you get to this point, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like, okay, you have an object, it has lines, it draws those lines based on whatever the active camera object is. If you're just kind of swirling around in 3D space, it's not going to look correct. You have to be at the camera view, because that's what it uses to ray trace everything. Speaking of ray tracing, this system is using, I'm not a Blender developer. Sorry, Francesco. So I'm doing a little bit of guesswork here, but the system was designed, it was originally the LandPR build, a custom build of Blender. The functionality of that got merged into Master around the 2.8 time, I think. And a lot of that was developed by a user named, on Twitter, he goes by Yiming Wu. And, okay, good. Thank goodness. So, as far as I know, a lot of the way that under the hood this ray traces everything is with the Intel Embry operations, which is a pretty high performance CPU based form of ray tracing, and especially Freestyle, I'm pretty sure used pretty much the same method. The only problem is that I've run into is that since it's CPU based in heavier scenes, it gets really heavy. That's why I keep telling you guys, like, leave the modifier off until you are ready to start playing with it, because otherwise it slows everything down, because it will calculate, since it's in real time, it will calculate not just every frame, but every frame that your Blender window is open. But there are some really cool things you can do with it. So, for instance, you can reference light objects, and you can trace shadow contours, which we'll just turn on right here. It's pretty simple, like a checkbox, That's what I was saying about it gets pretty self-explanatory from this point, except for a couple things which really confused me. In the documentation, no offense to the Blender developers, again, Francesco, he's shaking his finger at me, but the LineArt documentation, I think, is some of the most confusingly written documentation in the Blender wiki, especially in a couple areas. Maybe it's just me, but I set this scene up to try to clarify them so that when you guys go back and read the documentation on your own, you know kind of what you're looking at. We're going to start with the occlusion, the material mask. It was pretty confusing, but essentially what everybody thinks like would be an easy way for LineArt to work, or at least myself, is it would be great to be able to select on the object you want to trace the lines on a vertex group for where you want the lines to be, or for where you don't want the lines to be. That functionality is not possible in the current implementation of it, as far as I've seen. But what is possible is something that sounds like it should be that. It's called material masking. This is actually used not for masking areas on an object where you want lines, but rather a way to select lines that are already occluded by potentially a semi-transparent object. This can be really useful for things like glass. So over here we have this semi-transparent plane. It turns all the lines under it yellow. I'm going to reselect my grease pencil object here. This is pretty easy to, once you get to figure it out, but in order to do that effect, you do need multiple LineArt modifiers. So over here, I have 3 LineArt modifiers on this object. The first one is just our basic black contour tracing with some light and shadow tracing. The second one is our material mask. Now that takes everything that's being occluded by this plane and turning the line yellow. That can be useful for stylizing things like that are shooting through a pane of glass or something like that. With that, you have to set it up in this occlusion menu. In the occlusion menu, you get a pretty nondescript, very Blender 2.7 layer management system. Those that know 2.5 maybe, I guess, on old Blender. And there's some options that are grayed out, but they actually still function. So you can check material mask even though it's grayed out, and it will work. And then you can select a layer that you want the mask to reference. That layer is going to be set, if we select the plane, not in the LineArt menus, but rather on the material itself. So this is one of the reasons LineArt can be so confusing, is that in the past, you would go into Freestyle and all of your options for the lines were in there. Just about all the options for the lines were in the Freestyle menu, which was under like render scene settings or something like that. However, LineArt permeates everything in Blender. Even if you're not using a LineArt object at all, every collection menu is going to have its own LineArt tab where you can set whether every object in this collection should be included in the LineArt calculations, excluded, whether it should only occlude, or whether it should, there's a bunch of options here. Intersection only, no intersections, force the intersections. And you get collection masks, which is not to be confused with material masks. I've probably already lost 80% of you, but stay with me. Material masks, which is what we're doing with this glass pane over here, is under the material settings. So we have this material, this glass material, we'll call it. And normally you've got maybe your preview or your surface, your principled BSDF. If you scroll all the way down, you get to the LineArt section. You want to set a material mask with this. You can check it. You can set the layer that it's on. You can set the levels. This is also like, you don't need to worry about any of that. Come back to your grease pencil object. You need to make sure for whatever line you want to be in here, it has to reference that same layer. For clarity on this, remember the occluded, the masked grease pencil lines that we're using here are running in a second LineArt modifier. We have a total of 3 LineArt modifiers on this object. In the second one, we have the ability to reference potentially a new layer and a new material. We could reference a new collection if we wanted to. For clarity, I'm referencing a new material. That's just this yellow line. So that's material masks. The second kind of confusing method is collection masking, which is what you noticed if I were to select. So just to set the stage, in our third LineArt modifier here, which I have drawing blue lines, I'll just turn it on. You can see we have a blue line here. What this is good for is mapping the intersections of different collections when they intersect. This kind of seems like a bit of an edge use case. I haven't ever in any production needed to do something like this, but it's nice that you could. How to set this up is take an object, put it in a new collection. So we took this cylinder, which was in our basic collection. I put it in a sub collection. I just called it cylinder collection. We need it to be in its own collection so that we can reference it properly. That cylinder collection, not the object itself, but the entire collection, gets its own LineArt mask. So we are going to include this in the calculations. We are going to use a collection mask, and I put it on this layer. This is in the collections menu, which I don't think anybody ever goes into really, like unless you do a lot of collection instancing maybe. But this is where the setting is, and this is how Grease Pencil modifier accesses it. So in our third modifier menu here, we're going to scroll down past occlusion. The next section is intersection. It's pretty straightforward. You just match exactly the layer that your collection mask was on that you need to isolate. And you click exact match. And that's how you can get fancy blue lines. So cool. I probably just confused everybody because those are the most confusing parts of LineArt. But now I want to inspire you a little bit. So I'm going to open a different project and I'm going to show you a little bit about how I'm actually bringing this to life on characters and using it in sort of a production environment. Spoiler alert, we usually don't ever get anywhere near as complex as I just got. It's pretty easy to figure out the rest of everything that the LineArt tool is useful for on your own. Even though I made it sound really confusing, please don't be scared to go try it. So this is a character that we've modeled and that I've rigged at my studio. We're developing a really fun sort of 3D street racing anime series that we want to do. And to do that, we need to be able to render very stylized. Evie's probably going to yell at me a little bit. It already did. I don't think the shaders will work properly because we're actually using a custom build of Blender for this that allows some special NPR things like light linking and breaking up the types of shadows that it references and everything. So you can see her face came out all weird. But that's okay because what I really want to show you is the LineArt. Specifically, some of the ways we have to push LineArt as much as possible in order to get it to function. Where's my camera? Here it is. And I'm probably going to have to turn so here's the lines. I'm going to take my camera and lock it to my viewport real quick. So that now wherever I rotate the camera view, the lines will also appear. So on this line art object, which I just have called Yoko lines, I have 4 different layers. Each of those will bake their own set of keyframes so that I can control them independently. We've got hair, eyes, face, and body lines. Those can all be, even after they've been baked, I can turn them on or off, whether I need them or not. We have pretty much one material. I know there are 2 here, but the eyes are also just a black line. There's nothing really special about it. But we're using a ton of modifiers. Some of them I have switched off. The key points are hair and the body and then the face. The reason we have so many modifiers is because we have to calculate the geometry differently between each modifier. The big reason for that is that when you are doing this sort of style, you want the lines to appear in certain places. If I allowed LineArt to trace every contour on the face, it would look very strange and we would end up with lines in places that we don't want. Such as, especially since this is a NPR rig, would you please just settle? Especially since this is an NPR rig, we're doing things to the topology that are not normal. And it results in weird deformations. The contour tracing system in LineArt picks up on those, and it can sometimes put a weird jagged line in like the corner of the mouth where really a cute little dimple should be, if anything, right? So what we're doing here is breaking up everything into groups. So for the hair, we're going to render that just with contour tracing. The clothes, we're going to render with contour and creases. The face, we're going to render with, first there's a silhouette pass, which has to be calculated differently because of the way that we're using edge marks. And then the internals of the face, such as the mouth, get calculated separately as well. Real quick, maybe I can kind of make this apparent, but the way in which, well, earlier I said that it's impossible to select areas of a mesh where you want lines to appear or not. That's not true. It's just not possible to set that up with vertex groups. But there is a hidden secret vertex group in Blender that's called freestyle lines. So, oh man, I'm still right-click select. So every time I hit something, it brings up the context menu. So if I were to tab into edit mode on this face, you can see all these green areas are freestyle face sets. Those are areas that I do not want lines to be drawn. And you can set that up either inverted or normal in the LineArt modifier. There's a difference, however, between freestyle face sets and freestyle edge sets. The best way to think of them, and you can, if I were to select a face on here, you can go into edge, you can, in the edge menu, you can mark freestyle edges or you can clear the freestyle edges. In the face menu, under face data, then you can select freestyle faces and clear freestyle faces. Freestyle faces and edges, the best way to think of them is that edges are additive. Edges are used when typically you want freestyle or LineArt to always draw this edge as like maybe an accent or something else. You can also invert it so that you can tell freestyle, never draw this edge. That doesn't always work. Freestyle faces are more subtractive. It's more reliable for you to set up a freestyle face set and say, don't draw lines in this area. LineArt will find a way around that sometimes if there's an intersection in that area. But for the most part, you can avoid things. This is why you need so many or this is why we found out that we needed so many modifiers on the subject, because say for the face silhouette, we do need those areas around her mouth to be drawn, say from a profile, which, yeah, along this edge. So we have to calculate the geometry in different ways between even the same object. So for the very final thing that I'll do, I'll show you a little animation we made with that character just to kind of like showcase what you can do and how cool it can look. Yeah, we'll open a media player here. So it's fun. And yeah, so this project is called Samurai Blue. We have a Kickstarter going for another like week or so. Please support us so I can continue to make cool anime and stuff like that.
And the URL for that Kickstarter is on the slide material. So just go back to the recording and get it. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we got a question for you.
Yes, I'll take questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a model.
Yes.
You have a camera angle.
Yes.
And then you insert line art.
Yes.
Do you have the ability to drop the opacity on everything except for the line art, and then convert it to a 2D plane?
Oh yeah, totally. So without trying to show you because it'll take too long. It's totally possible. The best way to do it, well, there are a couple ways you could do it. If you wanted the line art to be compressed in 2D in Blender so that you could go in and like fill it with more grease pencil, the way you can do that is just, turn everything else off after the line art has been baked, and then scale all the line art along the camera's local Z-axis, so it just collapses just straight down. I think you could also just use a modifier for that. I think there might be a modifier for that. I'm not sure. But then you could go in and color with grease pencil, fill it in however you wanted.
Do you believe you can take it and put it into the grease pencil and then animate the lines?
Yeah, totally, because these are all grease pencil objects. So you can these, and they are grease pencil strokes. It draws just grease pencil strokes. So you can take all of these lines, get rid of the objects that made them, after you bake it, and create an entirely different palette. You can even go in with the grease pencil sculpting tools and kind of mold them if like you didn't like how it moved in one place, or you want to like stretch it or squash it or something like that. Like everything you can do with grease pencil applies to grease pencil line art. That's the power of it, really, is being able to like change it afterwards.
All right. So I'd recommend if you have questions for Wyatt, definitely corner them afterwards. And just to reiterate, besides the bagels that Sean kindly brought in the back of the room, there is a beer and pizza place that's about 10 minutes walk from here. We're going to go, and if you'd like to join us, grab beverages and get a bite to eat. First round's on me. So, yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Wyatt. So are you able to present?
I'm trying to share my screen. I don't think it's there.
Yeah, I think we got you. All right. I'm going to put you on full screen and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Some introduction to my project is I created this film and posted it on my YouTube channel, which is Misha for Sculpt, and it was seen by Brett Levy from Virtual Songlines in Australia, and he contacted me to do some development with him. And so with that, I've been doing some work with metahumans and with Blend AR mocap. So this is a video that all right, so I created this short film and posted it on my YouTube channel, Misha for Sculpt right there. And Brett Levy from Virtual Songlines in Australia saw it, and he contacted me to do consulting with him on his project. So with that, I've been using Blender and Blend AR mocap to create animations from video, and that's the animation that was created from this video here. And I've been using metahumans to create the character, bringing it into Blender, which I've had some difficulty with because of, conversion from Unreal, but I'm able to do it and add hair and textures. And so Brett talked to me about doing a rowing animation for his project. So with that, I got this video from YouTube and used Blend AR mocap to capture the motion from the video and transfer it to my character, which you see here. And it was pretty successful, I thought, for the movement, really capturing both arms and the body motion. And I took that into Blender. It was already in Blender, but then I expanded it and created this animation, which I think came out pretty successful. So part of the process was to bring the character into a Blender file. And then Brett provided me with the accurate canoe and paddle for the First Nation characters, and how, the actual materials and model that they created this character, that they created these models with. And so I animated that. Oh, I have to scrub through that. As you can see, the character is moving, but I had to animate the paddle to make it accurate. And then in this second file, I attached the left hand to the paddle through an object that I parented to the paddle to make the arms move correctly. And the result was this animation. And it took me a while to convert all the animation and models into Unreal, which I wanted to do for our project. I also went into Houdini to try and simulate the water simulation, but I didn't have success with exporting that to Unreal. But I basically took those animations from Blender and then brought it into Unreal. And this is some of the resulting animation inside of Unreal with the rural Australia environment that you can get from the Unreal Marketplace. And that really helped create a realistic scene for my animation, and provided really great background for the characters. And I'm really trying to achieve very realistic looking scenes that you can really be enthralled with. And thinking about converting this into a virtual reality film that you could be sitting inside of the canoe and moving with the characters. So, this scene was created with the Blender Compositor, which I found to be really fantastic for being able to create this film. And the greatest part of this, I think, is this Blender file. This Blender this blend file is less than a megabyte, even though there's gigabytes of footage being composited here. It's really an efficient way to do your compositing and then bring it into Unreal. So yeah, that's basically my presentation. Like I said, I had some difficulty creating and converting all this footage into Unreal. Also, the hair I had some difficulty with. I was able to import it into Unreal, but I wasn't getting the rotations that I had in this animation. So what I ended up doing was taking out the rotation of the head. So basically the characters are just looking forward, and the hair seems to fit pretty well with that. So moving forward into the future, Blend AR mocap is now completely compatible with free mocap, which is a free program for creating motion capture with multiple cameras that really creates great stability. And so with that and Blend AR mocap, you can really do some great things with Blender. And I'm looking forward to using multiple cameras to create character animation inside of Blender, and then bringing that into Unreal for finals. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope
Awesome.
Everything came out clearly.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Why don't you go cheers?
Thanks.
So we're down to our last 4 minutes here. Any questions for Mike? Maybe Mike, you want to play that video full screen while we're
Sure, it's just a couple minutes. So
Mike's presented on the Blend AR mocap in the past. It's a pretty slick tool if you want to just do mocap on the cheap. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead.
What was specific about this project that made you want to bring it into Unreal?
I didn't catch the question.
Well, yeah. What was specific about this project that made you want to bring it into Unreal from Blender?
Well, with both of these films, they're rendered in real time in Unreal, even though so that's a big advantage. I don't have to wait for this render to render every frame. It just plays. I'm able to play this in real time in Unreal and record it, right? So I just place the cameras where I want them and then move them to where I want them to follow the action. And it's real time. It's just like how people are creating content in these virtual environments for TV and film. I'm able to preview it in real time and be able to get the feedback for exactly what's happening. And also Virtual Songlines is using Unreal as their platform and creating content of Australian First Nation peoples and the environments and their lives. And the project encompasses the entire continent of Australia and all the different peoples, First Nation peoples that are in all the parts of Australia. And, they want it to be a real-time experience, and they want it to be an educational experience. And, I'm privileged to be a part of that. But as I said, I'm pretty much committed into using Blender for creating these characters and creating all the animations and all the content inside of Blender. I really want to use it because it's a very powerful tool and I can do quite a lot with it. And also with this new version of Blend AR mocap, you can actually tweak the rig so you can customize a rig to be able to work with your characters. And my next project is going to be to create a metahuman rig inside of Blender that I'll be able to control with Blend AR mocap and be able to create the animation directly to a metahuman rig, which I can bring right back into Unreal. Also, Unreal is licensing the metahumans for free, but they have to be used inside of Unreal. And I find that their characters are very, very high quality. And so I'm really privileged to be able to use it and be able to create content in Unreal.
Cool. All right. And with that, Mike, you landed us exactly at 2:00. We ran about 30 minutes over with our meeting, so I'm going to ask you to wrap it here. But thanks everybody for your time. And I think one thing here, normally after these meetings, a few of us get together for beverages and food. Let me just show you where we're going here. Culver City Library. All right. So we are here. We're basically just going to walk straight down Overland. Apparently there's a 10-minute walk and there's a pizza joint. Let's call it, let's see.
It's just from the library, go straight out, you make a right turn up Overland, and then after you cross Jefferson, you just keep walking a little bit further, and the first entrance where cars can pull into the parking lot, you go in there and you kind of hug, where you'll see a Chase, kind of hug that, and then a couple of restaurants down there's Stafford.
Yeah, here we go. So basically this is what it says. This is a 10-minute walk. I've never done this walk. I've never been to this venue, but it looks like a cool venue to get some pizza and beer afterwards. Like I say, first round's on me. So awesome. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So this is the main drag. Just go out and walk right and head on down 10 minutes. We can walk together, actually. Sean, will you join? Okay. Sean could be the guide as I'm packing up all the tech here. So fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope it was a good time for you guys. And thanks to all the presenters. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next meeting, which hopefully will be around June, around Blender 3.6.